Hi, welcome to the Online Jewelry Academy. I'm Professor John R. and I'm your instructor. Now before I go any further, I just want to tell you that there's some bonus footage at the end of this video. Don't skip ahead, just watch the whole thing and wait till you get there, but you don't want to miss it. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make this, a cast-in-place urchin. Now, what is that? Well, if you look carefully at this piece, you can see that in the center there's a gemstone. Now that gemstone was put into the wax and cast as part of the casting. So it was surrounded by wax, the caster invested it, and the molten metal went into the investment and filled the void that was left by the melting of these wax wires, and the stone was captured. Now why would anybody want to do this? Well, this is a trick that manufacturers use in order to have a lot of pieces made at one time where the stones are already in them. That way they save money. They don't have to hire a stone setter to put a stone into every single one of them. So it might be a way for you to save a little money and actually make a really cool piece. To do this, you need to work with transparent gem material or cubic zirconia. You want a transparent stone that isn't affected by heat. So in other words, you can't work with something like citrine, amethyst, topaz, because you would change the color of the stone if you subjected them to heat. You also can't use things that are organic, like a pearl, or opaque stones like turquoise, malachite, things like that. They would just be destroyed by this process. But in this case, I've actually used a large cubic zirconia that simulates a 2-carat diamond. Now, let me show you what you're going to need for this project. So over here, I have a variety of wax wires. In this project, I'm going to use the 10, 14, and 18 gauge wires primarily. I'm going to secure them using my alcohol lamp that I'll light with my lighter. And I may perfect things with my Emery board here. I'm going to use my Exacto blade to cut wires. I'll use my wax tool, which is just a needle in a handle. The needle's bent. And I'll use that to pick up wax in order to attach them. Over here, I've got a little wooden dowel. And what I'm going to do with that is I've used this stone setting burr and I've burred out a little indentation on one end, and I've filled it with microcrystalline wax. Here's a little lump of it here. And this is what I'm going to use to hold my piece. Now guess what? Along with this, you need to get some type of block of wood, drill a hole in it, and then that way you can put your holding stick into it. Because guess what? You know that when you're in the middle of this project, the phone's going to ring, your mother-in-law needs a ride from the airport now. So what are you going to do? Well, you're just going to pop it in there and you're good to go and nothing's going to happen to your project. Okay, also in front of me, I've got a piece of acrylic sheet, and this is great. This is going to be my cutting board, and I like this because the wax doesn't really want to stick to it, and it provides me a nice flat surface that I can roll the wires on in order to make them nice and straight. Otherwise, this thing's going to look kind of like it's been dead in the ocean for a while. I also have a little ruler here, metric, to cut my lengths of wire, and I've got a large CZ here. I also have some blue inlay wax that I'm going to use, and I have it melted into my little wax pot. And I'm working on top of a piece of parchment paper. This is a good trick. If you don't want wax to stick to a tabletop surface, put down a piece of this baking parchment. It'll come right off, no problem. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply magnification to my head. Now this is my Visor. You can get these with all different powers of lenses, but it's going to be really helpful to help me see how I'm applying each one of these little tiny wires. Now, the wax that I have in front of me, I've got a piece of the 10 gauge round wax wire, and I don't know if the camera can pick it up or not, but there's an imperfection on the wire. There's like a little groove running down it. Now these wires are extruded, and if there's an imperfection that runs the whole length of the wire, use it as a guide. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use it so that I go all the way around the girdle of my stone and have it in the same position so it's nice and even. Okay, so let me light my alcohol lamp here. And what I need to do is I need to cut an angle to this wire so that I can get it to go around my stone. So I'm heating my Exacto blade up, and what this does is it helps it to cut through the material a lot easier. So I'm going to bring these down so I can see what I'm doing. Get a little close, and let me find my groove. There it is. Okay, so I want the groove on the side, and I'm just going to cut a sharp angle like that. And I don't need that piece of wire, so I'm going to let it go. The next thing that I want to do is I need to warm this up a little bit. Don't go right next to the flame. Go up here. Now, you could put this in your mouth, in your ear, but coming up here is going to warm it up too. So I just want to get it a little bit warm because I want the wire to be a little bit more malleable so that I can bend it around my stone. Okay, so it's a little softer now. And I'll pick up my stone and I'm going to look for that groove again. And there's the groove, and I'm just going to position the stone in the groove and bring the wax wire around the stone. Remember, I'm trying to capture the stone in the wax. So I'm bringing it around. Got my fingers all over it, so it's hard for you to see it at this point. But there we go. So let me make a few minor adjustments before I show it to you. Because you want to get, it's important to start this piece correctly. It's your foundation. There we go. So I have the stone surrounded by the wax. Now what I want to do is I need to secure the end of the wax wire to itself. And I'm going to do that with a little bit of the blue inlay and my wax tool. Let me tell you a little bit about the wax tool though. Like I said, this is just a needle. It's like a tapestry needle or about. And the point of the needle is pushed into the handle and I clipped off the eye. Now I did that so the wax would fall off of it. So watch what happens. If I put it into the flame, I can pick up some of the wax on the tool. And when I come back to the flame with the wax, this wax will move towards that bend, that little elbow. And then when I bring it over to my piece, I'm able to just apply it right to that seam and get it perfectly in there. So you can always reheat your tool and come back in and manipulate the wax a little bit more if you need to. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to repeat this process on the back side of it. Now remember, every time that you make a connection with your wax, think of it this way. You want to blend the wax in such a way that it just seems like it always was that. It's natural. So you're just adding wax in order to make it nice and perfect. Okay, so once you've got that accomplished, what we can do is we will put this piece on our cutting board, and I'm going to take the Exacto blade and heat it up. And what I want to do is I want to cut off the excess wax. So I'm just going to come around and just gently cut that wax away. All right, so when you cut away anything from your piece, if you cut a little too close, don't worry, you can add wax. Likewise, you can always remove excess wax if you get too much. Okay, so this is a little bit hard now, so I can bring my visor back down. And what I want to do is I'm going to take my Emery board here, and I'm just going to give it a better shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, because it's actually going to be hidden by a lot of the little tentacles that are going to come off of it. Okay, so that's good enough for right now. The next thing that I want to do is I want to apply a bail to the piece. And if you look at the piece over here, what you can see is that the bail is actually just hidden into the makeup of the piece. So I'm going to use a wax wire. I'm actually going to use a, let's see, 14 gauge wire. And what I want to do is I just want to give it a bend. I'm just going to maybe warm it up a little bit so it's a little more malleable. And then I'll bend it over. And you could bend around a tool if you want to, if you feel more secure doing that. And I'm going to say, is that about, yeah, that's a good length. Okay, so once I have a bend to it, I can take my Exacto blade, heat it up, and then just cut it off. All right, so there's my little bend that's going to become my bail. Now remember, this is going to be metal, so it's going to be flexible and it's going to bend to a certain degree, but not that much. So you want to get it as good as you possibly can at this point. So I'm going to just stick something in there so it can accommodate a larger chain. Okay, so once you have it bent to a point that you're happy, what you can do is, at this point, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab my wax stick and I'm going to push the culet of my stone into the wax so that I can hold it on the stick. Now what I do is I'm going to take my bail and approximately where I made the closure of the seam, I'm just going to push the two ends of this wax wire against the larger wax wire. Okay, so I've got the two ends of the wire on the larger piece. Now I need to connect it. So I'm going to heat my wax tool again. I'm going to melt some wax in my cup, get some wax onto my tool, and then bring that wax back into the heat so it's molten, and then come over here and I'm just going to apply the wax to that bail on both sides. Now remember, you want all of your wax connections to be smooth and even and clean. You don't want any air bubbles to be able to get trapped in them. Sometimes you work with the wax and it behaves, other times it has a mind of its own. Okay, so I have the bail secured. I'm going to put it in my stand. Now what I want to do is I want to prep some of the wires that I'm going to add to the piece. So I'm going to start with the larger gauge wires. And what I want to do, I'm going to turn this around so I can see it, is I want to use, of the larger 14 gauge round wires, I want to cut pieces that are 2 centimeters long and some that are 1 centimeter long. The piece is more interesting if it has variety. Now, I'm cutting these pieces a little bit longer than the example that I have on the bench, but I'm doing that so it shows up better in the video, and I think it'll be a little bit more dramatic too. Okay, so I can bring out several wires at a time if I want to, and I'll just line them up. And like I said, remember, you can kind of roll things on top of this surface if you need to in order to straighten them out. And then if I line them up with the end of the ruler, I can just pick up my Exacto blade, heat it, and then I can just come to the right location and start to cut them. All right, so those are 2 centimeters long. Let me cut some that are just 1 centimeter long. There we go. Okay, so let me show you how to start this. The first thing that I want to do is I'll start with one of the longer pieces, and what's great about this is I can just push the wax against the piece and it's naturally just kind of sticky, so it just wants to just stick to itself. So I'm heating my tool, picking up some wax, okay, bringing that wax to temperature, and then just coming over here and applying it to the base of that wire. Okay, so there's one, and they don't need to be perfectly straight up and down. Okay, so this takes a little bit of time. Let me work on this a little bit, and when I come back, I'll show you the results of my first round with the 14 gauge wires. Okay, I went around and I applied 1 centimeter and 2 centimeter lengths of the 14 gauge round wax wire around the piece that's supporting my stone. Now, I've gone ahead in the meantime and I've also cut other lengths of wire. Now, these are the smaller 18 gauge wires, and the lengths that I cut are a little bit different. I still cut some 1 centimeter lengths because I wanted to have that to be somewhat consistent within the piece, but then I cut some that were 1.5 centimeters long so that there will be a little bit of variety in terms of the length. Now, you just are going to apply these in the exact same way, but here's the thing that I want to mention. You'll notice how I have them going at all different angles and directions. You want to continue to do the same thing with the thinner gauge wires. Use your best judgment. You're the designer. Create something beautiful. The idea is to create an effect that it's going to look almost like a dandelion. Okay, so bit of advice. One thing that I would suggest doing is pick up the smaller ones first and start with the smaller ones, because it's going to be difficult to add when they start to get a little bit more dense and the piece is a little more populated with wires. It's going to be hard to add a shorter wire, so start with the short ones. And you're going to do it exactly the same way. We're just going to pick up wax and we're going to heat it, and then we're going to come over to our piece and apply it in order to keep it in place. Okay, so I'm going to continue adding the smaller gauge wires, and I'll come back and show you my results. Okay, I have finished adding my smaller or thinner gauge wires to the piece, and it's a lot better looking than it was when you last saw it, I'm sure. Now remember, yours is going to look entirely different from mine, and I'm just demonstrating the technique. You're your own designer. It's your eye. Make whatever you want. Enjoy this project. I think it's going to produce a lovely result, and I'm sure that your caster will work with you to make sure that it's produced in whatever metal you choose. Now, the one that I have already cast, which is already here on the table, I chose to do it in sterling silver, and I oxidized it. Now, on the OJA playlist, we have plenty of videos, as you guys know, and we have videos that cover how to apply oxidation, either using chemicals or using egg whites. So I went ahead and I used liver of sulfur for this one. I like liver of sulfur because it produces a more bluish tint to the oxidation than some of the harsher chemicals. So have fun making interesting sea urchin inspired cast in place pendants. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember, there are plenty more at onlinejewelryacademy.com, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you'd like to support the production of future videos, you can do so by making a contribution through patreon.com. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to watch the bonus. You've been working at your bench all day perfecting a wax for a beautiful piece of jewelry for a client, and now you have to get this fragile thing to the caster and your nerves are fragile. What do you do? Well, open up the bottle, take out some of the cotton, get a small container, put the cotton in the container, put your wax in the container, dig in for a little more cotton, and then close up the container, and now you're ready to go to the caster. And you won't even need these when you get home.